4 years. That's how long I had worked at Halcyon Retail Group. 4 years of showing up early, staying late, skipping holidays, filling in last-minute shifts, and smiling through 12-hour Saturdays while Luke, the store manager and part owner, barked orders like we were soldiers in his personal army. At 26, I had built a reputation as the dependable one, the one who never said no, the one who held everything together when others called in sick or the registers crashed. Everyone knew that if Kelly was on shift, things ran smooth, and Luke knew it too. Halcyon is a family, he used to say during our morning huddles, and in this family, loyalty means everything. I took those words seriously, probably too seriously, which is why I hesitated for nearly 3 days before I worked up the courage to ask for one Saturday off. Just one, because Elton John, the Elton John, was playing his final concert tour in my city, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see the legend live. I still remember staring at the send button in my inbox, my heart pounding like I was asking for a raise instead of a day off. The email was polite, professional, and respectful. Subject: request for Saturday, June 10th off. Hi, Luke. I hope you're well. I'd like to request Saturday, June 10th off in advance. I'd love to attend Elton John's farewell concert that evening. I'm happy to help with coverage during the week and will ensure a smooth shift handoff. Thanks for considering. Best, Kelly. I hit send and waited. No reply that day. Nothing the next morning either. Then, just after lunch, a message popped up. Luke, we'll talk about this later. You should really consider if this is the kind of priority you want to set. That was it. No, we'll try. No, sorry, we're short-staffed. Just judgment. Confusion settled in my stomach. Had I offended him? I double-checked the schedule. We weren't understaffed that day. In fact, 2 part-timers had already blocked it off weeks ago for a wedding. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. The next day, I showed up early, ready to talk. I spotted Luke near the back stockroom, holding a clipboard and scribbling something furiously. Hey, Luke, do you have a minute? He didn't even look up. Still planning to go to that concert? Caught off guard by how blunt he was, I stammered, yes. I mean, if it's possible. He set his clipboard down with a clack, stepped toward me, and said 6 words I'll never forget. Then take off your vest and leave. I blinked. Wait, what? You heard me, he said, voice sharp. If Elton John is more important than your job, then you clearly don't belong here. The room fell silent. My coworkers froze mid-task, eyes darting between us. My fingers trembled as I slowly unzipped my navy blue Halcyon vest. It felt like peeling off 4 years of loyalty, stress, and swallowed pride. I didn't say a word. Just handed it to him, turned around, and walked out. Past the checkout counters I used to troubleshoot, past the display table I had designed last Black Friday, past the break room where I had once worked through the flu because everyone's counting on you, Kelly. Outside, the sunlight was blinding. I unlocked my bike and started pedaling, my chest tight with shock, confusion, and something else. Anger. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking. Not from the ride, but from the sheer audacity of it all. Fired, for asking a day off to see a concert. Fired, not even formally. Just told to leave like I was trash. I told my mom everything. She listened quietly, then asked the one question I hadn't thought to consider. Did he even have the right to do that? That night, we dove into research. Labor law websites, employee rights forums, legal advice threads. The deeper we went, the clearer it became. Luke didn't just overreact. He broke the law. In my country, you can only be terminated on the spot under extreme circumstances. Gross misconduct, theft, physical aggression, fraud. Not for wanting to hear Rocket Man live. The next day, I scheduled a consultation with a labor attorney. When I explained the situation, he chuckled. Actually, chuckled. This is the cleanest wrongful dismissal case I've seen in months, he said. We're going to make this right. I said nothing. But my lawyer? He said plenty. The law office smelled like polished wood and old books. It felt official, grounded, everything my firing hadn't been. Across the desk sat Martin Feldman, labor attorney with 30 years of courtroom experience and an expression that combined calm confidence with just a touch of mischief, like he enjoyed seeing companies try to bluff their way through the law. "So," he said, after I finished recounting every detail from my last few days at Halcyon, "they fired you on the spot in front of your coworkers for requesting a day off?" I nodded, heart pounding again, just from reliving it. Not for refusing work, not for walking out, just for asking. Martin leaned back, hands steepled. Unlawful dismissal. No written warnings, no misconduct, and no documented cause. That's not just a labor violation. That's a textbook example of wrongful termination. He paused, then asked, "Do you have any emails?" I opened my folder and slid them across the table. The original time-off request, Luke's cold reply, and the follow-up from HR that came after I was already let go. It was only 2 lines long. "Hi, Kelly. We understand you are no longer with the company. Please return any company property. We wish you the best." Martin read it and smiled. Not kindly. "Oh, they've made this very easy. No mention of cause, no disciplinary record, and no formal exit documentation. This won't just be a claim. This will be a slam dunk." I didn't know whether to feel relieved or even more outraged. For 4 years, I had given that job everything, and in return, they tossed me out like an expired coupon. "Do I have a case to get my job back?" I asked. Martin shook his head gently. "You could, but I wouldn't recommend it. Do you want to go back there?" I thought about Luke's face, his tone, the silence in the room when he made me take off my vest. No apology. No humanity. "No," I said, "not even for a second." "Good," he said. "Then we're not asking for your job back. We're asking for 6 months of lost wages, unused vacation compensation, emotional damages, and a formal acknowledgement of unlawful dismissal." I blinked. "We can do that?" Martin smiled. "We're going to do better than that, but first we send a letter." Within days, Halcyon received the formal notice. Martin CC'd me in the email chain. It was brief, professional, and devastatingly precise. It laid out the facts, referenced local labor statutes, and concluded with the words, "We are prepared to resolve this matter amicably or through legal proceedings if necessary." I half expected a firestorm in response. Instead, we got silence. A full week went by. No reply from Luke. No message from HR. Not even an automatic acknowledgement. It was the same dismissive cold shoulder they'd always given to anything that didn't benefit them. Until a single email came in. From Halcyon's HR director, Lisa Monroe. "We respectfully disagree with your client's characterization of events." Ms. Kelly was not terminated, but rather voluntarily walked off the job. "We consider the matter closed." My jaw dropped. "I what?" I gasped, showing the email to Martin. "Walked off?" "They're bluffing," he said coolly. "And they're sloppy. That's why I asked if there were any witnesses." There were. Half the team was there. One of them texted me that night asking what happened. Perfect. Save that message. Screenshot it. Document everything. Something shifted in me at that moment. I had been shocked. I had been humiliated. But now, I was focused. They wanted to twist the truth? Fine. But I had receipts. I had a timeline. And most importantly, I had someone on my side who knew exactly how to handle bullies in suits. We filed the official claim 2 days later. Luke must have been served the papers on a Thursday, because by Friday morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, it's Luke. Can we talk? I think we had a misunderstanding." I didn't respond. Martin did. "All communication should be directed to legal counsel. Please refrain from contacting our client directly." The silence that followed? That was the sound of power shifting. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. gathering documents, organizing testimonies, and responding to increasingly desperate messages from Halcyon's HR department. And during all of it, I finally went to that concert. Elton John's voice filled the arena, every lyric echoing louder than ever before. I'm still standing, yeah, yeah, yeah. I stood with 30,000 strangers, singing at the top of my lungs, realizing that this concert wasn't just a night out. It was a turning point. The moment I decided that no one would ever make me feel small again for asking to live my life. The day of the hearing arrived like thunder in the distance, slow, rumbling, and impossible to ignore. I stood in front of my closet for a full 10 minutes, staring at my only business suit. Navy. Simple. Clean lines. The kind of outfit that said, I'm not here to play games. I came prepared. As I buttoned the jacket, my hands were steady. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. My lawyer, Martin, met me outside the small claims courthouse, briefcase in hand, face unreadable. You ready? He asked. I nodded. More than ready. Inside the courtroom, it looked less like what you see on TV and more like a conference room with wood paneling and uncomfortable chairs. But the tension in the air was very real. Then I saw him. Luke. He was seated at the respondent's table, tapping his foot, his jaw tight. He looked smaller than I remembered. No vest, no clipboard. Just a man in a too-tight suit, fidgeting beside a junior attorney who didn't look old enough to rent a car. He didn't make eye contact with me. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair and a gaze that could cut glass, called the session to order. She asked each side to briefly present their version of events. Luke's lawyer started. Your Honor, Ms. Kelly voluntarily left her position. There was no formal termination. The company acted in accordance with policy, and we believe this is a case of a disgruntled former employee seeking financial gain. I almost laughed. Martin stood next. Calm, steady, every word deliberate. Your Honor, Ms. Kelly was terminated on the spot for requesting a lawful, reasonable day off. No misconduct, no documentation, no due process. We have written communication, text messages, eyewitness statements, and a timeline that makes the sequence of events indisputable. The judge nodded slowly, flipping through the file Martin had submitted the week before. I could see the printed emails, the screenshots, even my original shift schedules. Then it was time for testimony. I took the stand. Martin guided me through it carefully, just like we practiced. I told the truth, clearly and calmly. No drama, just facts. I watched the judge take notes as I described that morning. Luke asking, do you still want to go to that concert? And me saying yes. And then, take off your vest and leave. Did you ever receive a warning? Martin asked. No. Were you ever disciplined? No. Did anyone from the company explain your employment status after that day? No. Luke's lawyer tried to shake me during cross-examination, but it was weak. You were emotional that day, weren't you? Yes, I said, but not confused. I know what being fired looks like. Then came Luke's turn to testify. He stood, adjusted his tie, and tried to wear that same smug confidence I remembered. But something was different now. He was on the defensive. I never fired her, he said. I was just trying to get her to think about her priorities. When she took off the vest, I was surprised. She walked out. I didn't tell her to. Martin didn't even flinch. So, to clarify, your version is that asking her to remove her work uniform and leave was not a dismissal? Luke hesitated. It was a figure of speech. A figure of speech? Martin echoed. In front of witnesses? After a denied time-off request? In the middle of her shift? Luke floundered, eyes darting. She misunderstood me. Martin opened a folder and handed something to the judge. Your Honor, this is a sworn written statement from two of Ms. Kelly's co-workers, confirming that Mr. Harper ordered her to leave the premises and collected her vest himself. Luke's mouth opened, closed. No comeback. And then the moment that sealed it. Martin turned to the judge and said, We'd also like to submit a copy of the company's employee handbook, which clearly outlines proper termination procedures, none of which were followed in this case. The judge flipped through it, frowning. Luke looked like he was shrinking into his chair. The hearing wrapped up within an hour. The judge didn't issue a verdict on the spot. I will review all submitted documentation and deliver a written decision within 30 days, she said, her voice firm. But let me be clear. This is not a matter to be taken lightly. Employment rights exist for a reason. Outside the courthouse, Martin clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did great. I feel like I just ran a marathon, I said, half laughing. You held your own. You stayed professional. That's going to matter. We stood there for a moment in silence. The sun was shining. The street buzzed with life. People passed by with coffee cups, briefcases, headphones, clueless that a quiet act of justice had just unfolded inside those walls. I didn't know what the verdict would say when it arrived in the mail, but I knew what I had already gained: my dignity, my voice, and the strength to stand up, even when someone tried to make me feel small for daring to ask for something I had earned. 3 weeks passed. 21 days of checking the mailbox every afternoon like it held a piece of my soul. I had moved on in some ways. Job hunting, updating my resume, getting occasional interviews. But emotionally, I was still tethered to that courtroom, to that moment on the witness stand where I looked Luke in the eye and told the truth. And then, on a quiet Thursday morning, the envelope came. It was thicker than expected. Cream-colored, embossed with the court's seal. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself breathe. Inside, the verdict. The language was formal, dry even, but every sentence hit like a wave of release. The court finds sufficient evidence to support the claim of unlawful dismissal. The respondent failed to follow appropriate termination protocols. The claimant is awarded 6 months' salary, compensation for unused vacation time, and legal fees. I felt tears sting my eyes. I had won. But more than that, I had been heard. I called Martin immediately. She ruled in your favor, he said before I could even say hello. I read the decision this morning. Solid ruling. Clean. No loopholes. I couldn't stop smiling. I don't even know what to say. Then don't, he replied. Let them do the talking now. You did your part. Within 2 weeks, the payment was processed. A lump sum landed in my bank account, 6 months' worth of wages, a tidy vacation payout, and reimbursement for every penny of legal costs. I stared at the number on the screen and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since the day I took off my vest and walked out the door. But money wasn't the part that mattered most. Something else happened. Something I never expected. The story started to spread. A friend of mine, Maya, who still worked retail, shared a vague post on social media about a friend who stood up to a toxic boss and won. It got hundreds of likes, then dozens of comments, people tagging each other, sharing stories of their own, asking for legal resources. 2 days later, I got a message from a former coworker at Halcyon. Just wanted to say thank you. You probably don't know this, but after what happened to you, 3 of us filed formal complaints about Luke to HR. Turns out there were a lot of similar incidents. Yours was just the most public. And brave. My stomach flipped. I had never thought of myself as brave. Just angry. Just tired of being walked over. But now, something was shifting. One morning, I walked past the Halcyon storefront, just out of curiosity. The windows were plastered with "Now Hiring" signs. A new assistant manager was listed on the schedule posted in the window. No sign of Luke. Later that day, another message landed in my inbox, this time from him. Kelly, I heard the court ruled in your favor. I just wanted to say, maybe I handled things badly. I didn't mean for things to go that way. It was a high-stress week. I hope you're doing well. Luke, I stared at the message for a long time. Not an apology. Not even accountability. Just a vague attempt to erase what had happened by smoothing it over with empty pleasantries. I didn't reply. Some people will never change, and some things don't deserve closure in the form of conversation. My closure had already come. Through a courtroom, a judge, and the unmistakable sound of my own voice refusing to be silenced. A week later, I was offered a new position, customer operations lead at a mid-sized tech retail startup. They'd heard about my story through a friend of a friend and wanted someone with real backbone on their team. I accepted. On my first day, the founder gave me a tour of the office. At the end, she turned to me and said, "I'm really glad you're here. We value fairness and respect here. You've lived through the opposite, and I think we need that kind of awareness." Something in me softened. Not all workplaces are the same. Not all leaders need to be feared. Not all battles end in bitterness. Some end with you standing taller than before, wiser, bolder, and a whole lot harder to break. 6 months ago, I stood outside Halcyon Retail Group, stripped of my uniform, my pride bruised, my future uncertain. Now, I stood in a different building altogether. Sleek glass walls, buzzing with quiet energy, sunlight pouring into open concept spaces where people collaborated like equals, not subordinates. I had a badge that read, Kelly Harper, Head of Customer Experience. And every morning I walked into that office not just to earn a paycheck, but to help build something better. The company, Novotech Retail, was a mid-sized, growing tech-focused chain that believed innovation started on the floor. The CEO, Amelia Nguyen, was in her early 40s, fiercely intelligent and refreshingly down-to-earth. She'd built Novotech from scratch after years of burnout in male-dominated boardrooms. Her mission was simple: treat employees like human beings. "I don't care how amazing your idea is," she said during my first team huddle. "If it comes at the cost of someone's dignity, it's not innovation. It's exploitation." I'd never heard a boss say that out loud before. Within weeks, I realized something else. My story had followed me here. Quietly, respectfully, but unmistakably. I caught whispers in the break room. "She's the one who stood up to Halcyon. Did you read the article in Retail Justice Weekly? She won, took them to court and everything. I didn't seek the attention, but I didn't run from it either. Because something had changed in me. I was no longer the girl who kept her head down to be safe. I had discovered what it felt like to use my voice. And now, I wasn't going to put it away again." One afternoon, Amelia called me into her office. She was sitting behind her desk, a stack of papers in front of her, eyes bright. "We're launching a new leadership training module," she said. "It's for team leads and store managers across all our locations, part of our integrity program." I nodded, curious. "And," she continued, "we want to include your story." I blinked. "You mean Halcyon?" She smiled. "With your permission, of course. We'd keep the names anonymous, but the lesson? That matters. We want every person in this company to understand what bad leadership looks like, and what standing up looks like, too." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." It was surreal. Seeing the timeline laid out, the email excerpts turned into teachable moments, the HR missteps broken down by legal analysts. What once felt like shame had become strategy. What once felt like defeat had become curriculum. I even filmed a short video for the course, just me sitting in a chair speaking directly to camera. "I didn't think asking for a day off would cost me my job," I said. But in the end, it gave me something more valuable than a paycheck. It gave me a mirror. And I saw someone worth fighting for. The feedback was overwhelming. Messages from store managers, regional leads, even part-time employees across the country. "Thank you for sharing. I had a manager like that once, too. I almost quit after being denied medical leave. Your story reminded me I'm not the problem. I never thought about documenting my work until now. I will from this day forward." It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who had been made to feel small for setting a boundary. Everyone who had been told they were replaceable. Everyone who swallowed their pride because they needed the job more than they needed justice. And slowly, I started hearing whispers about Halcyon too. The company had taken a major hit. Multiple wrongful termination claims followed mine. Luke had stepped down, though we all knew what that meant. HR had been restructured. Public trust took a dive, and investor confidence didn't bounce back. I didn't celebrate their downfall, but I did feel satisfied knowing the system that chewed people up was finally being held accountable. That winter, I returned to the same arena where Elton John had played his farewell concert. This time, it was for a leadership summit hosted by women in business. And this time, I wasn't in the nosebleeds. I was on stage. The spotlight was warm. The applause was real. And in that moment, I remembered standing outside Halcyon, vest in hand, too stunned to speak. Now I had plenty to say. I ended my talk with the same message I had written in my journal the night after the verdict. Never let someone convince you that silence is professionalism, that loyalty means obedience, or that your boundaries are selfish. You can be kind, you can be dedicated, you can be excellent, and still say, enough. As the audience rose to their feet, I felt something inside me settle. Not triumph, not revenge, but peace. I had walked out that day thinking I'd lost everything. But in truth, it was the day I found myself.